It is my pleasure to address the United States Brazil Connect Summit. The COVID-19 pandemic threatens the stability of our economies and our societies. Our latest economic outlook projects global GDP to fall by 4.5% this year, with some of the hardest hit G20 economies seeing their GDP shrink by over 10%. While growth is expected to pick up by around 5% next year, output in many countries will still be below the pre-crisis levels by the end of 2021. The crisis has also exposed a number of pre-existing structural vulnerabilities in our economies and societies. This is why now is a critical moment to think and plan for a new normal that adapts to the realities of our changing world. We must build back the global economy in a way that protects the environment, that protects public health, that safeguards people's well-being. We must build back better. Brazil's response to the crisis puts it in a good place to support this effort. Like many countries, it was pulling out of a long recession when the COVID-19 outbreak hit. So it brought the economy back into another even deeper recession. In fact, during the second quarter of 2020, output contracted by 9.7%. And we project that there will be an annual contraction of 6.5% for the whole of 2020. However, the government's swift reaction has made a difference. As early as March, Brazil's Congress declared a state of emergency and freed up funds for the federal government to fight the pandemic. These measures have been important to provide support to millions of vulnerable households, including those without formal employment and without social protection. Now, Brazil should make sure that the recovery is inclusive, sustainable, and green. In Brazil, the richest 10% of the population receives 42% of the total income, almost double the average OECD share of 24%. The high degree of inequality hinders both well-being and also long-term economic growth. Brazil needs to build a strong social contract with current and future generations, reducing informality and expanding the coverage of the social protection system. Brazil should also focus on raising productivity to boost growth in the long run. The government should keep advancing its structural reform agenda, promoting competition, reducing regulatory burdens, reducing tax complexity, and promoting further international trade. With a land area of 8.5 million square kilometers, Brazil needs to invest in connectivity. It needs to invest in infrastructure, including expanding communication networks in rural and remote areas to foster an inclusive, dynamic growth. Digital transformation can strengthen long-term resilience of small and micro businesses and help increase the effectiveness of e-learning and training programs, bringing better quality education to remote regions. Next week, we will launch the OECD Going Digital Review of Brazil with a number of specific recommendations in this regard. Finally, with 60% of the Amazon forest within its borders and home to the largest biodiversity reserve in the world, Brazil has the potential to lead the way in reshaping and rebuilding our global economy in a greener, more resilient, more inclusive way. A fruitful collaboration between the OECD and Brazil is pregnant with possibilities. The OECD remains dedicated to supporting Brazil in these efforts. Over the last 2 decades, we have built a very, very productive, a very substantive collaboration with Brazil. And Brazil has become our most engaged key partner. As part of the adherence process to the OECD codes of liberalization, Brazil has implemented important policy measures to level the playing field for foreign investors. Let me just name a few of some of the other reforms. The equity limit for foreign investors in Brazil, regarding air transport companies, was removed altogether. The limit for investment abroad of Brazilian open pension funds was increased. The requirements for foreign participation and establishment in the Brazilian banking sector were simplified, and participation in the reinsurance sector was by foreign providers was actually expanded. In addition, Brazil's Congress is considering a new legislation to modernize foreign exchange regulations, which is meant to further attract foreign investments. We're also making impressive progress in our joint 4-year project with Receita Federal on transfer pricing. This work has become increasingly more relevant in light of the crisis. Indeed, the positive outcomes may be key in helping the government raise additional tax revenues by preventing the current base erosion and profit shifting. They may also attract more foreign investment by removing the risks of double taxation. So, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, no country can face a pandemic alone. No country can address a crisis alone. And no country can build back better alone. Pooling our forces, pooling our know-how is the only way to ensure a truly resilient and sustainable recovery. So you can count on the OECD to intensify its efforts with all stakeholders so that together we can build a fairer, more inclusive, more resilient post-COVID-19 world. Thank you.